Hi, everybody. I'm Lori Pye, president of Viridis Graduate Institute. Thanks for joining us with our video series that we've started here at Viridis, answering questions that potential students or just concerned and curious citizens send in to us about our programs. So today I'm looking at the question of what is ecological psychology? What is ecopsychology? And I hope to answer that for you. You can certainly follow us on YouTube and find these videos on YouTube at Viridis Graduate Institute or on our website under our FAQ section at viridis.edu. So what is ecological psychology in that sense? It really is a very new way of approaching very old problems in that sense. But the lens is through new ways of thinking about ecology and new ways of thinking about psychology. So it's a nice blend of ecological understanding and psychological understanding. In other words, we're getting under issues that plague both our communities and our non-human worlds and our global infrastructure as well too. The idea behind ecological psychology is that it recognizes that we live with a complex and responsive planet. The planet is agental, it has agency, it responds to all of its life forms, including us. You know, what we all do and how we do it factors into climate processes, biogeochemical cycles, and ecological systems. And we're no different than an earthworm or a zebra or elephant or a great blue whale in that sense. We all factor in as to what we do that affect these processes. And the planet responds to each of its organisms in that way. So it acts on each of its life forms, each of us, as much as we act on the planet. A changing climate is probably the most poignant example. So problems that we think about in our communities today that our institutions, our organizations, our businesses, our communities face, from climate disaster to ecological and social justice conflicts, to lack of access and education, or to physical and mental health, lack of access to these areas, lack of access to economic fairness, mainly for women and those who living in impoverished areas, to the destruction caused by ecocide, culturalcide, and genocide are not new. These are not new issues. They're interrelated problems that stem from human narratives and their practices. In other words, from human psychology. So whether we're talking about a changed climate or human rights or labor standards or child labor or diversity, inclusion, racism, sexism, misogyny, how communities engage or relate with each other or not, how our businesses deal with these big issues. We're really looking at these through an eco-psychological lens, meaning that they are interdependent issues. They spin off of each other with their narratives. So if we think about every human behavior, every human action, every human practice rests on a narrative, the stories that we tell ourselves about who we are and who others are, the stories that we tell ourselves about the planet, whether it's mechanistic or technological or inert or just a rock out there somewhere. Those stories matter because they spin other stories that then have behaviors and practices to those stories. So for example, if there's a narrative, I'm a dominant species, I'm a human, I'm exceptional, I'm superior, I can do what I want with people, places, and things. I can treat the planet any way that I want. That's a detrimental narrative, and it will have destructive practices with it. So to be able to change those practices, we have to be able to detect the narrative, change the behavior, and then we change the practice. And that's our focus in ecological psychology. So the programs that we've designed here at Viridis Graduate Institute develop an ecological literacy, really learning the newest understanding of how the world works. different terminology so that it's not mechanistic, that it's not a dead planet that we do something to, that the planet has agency. It's very responsive to all of us. So that ecological literacy becomes important when we work that with developing psychological capacities and skills, censoring capacities, being able to sense our world instead of just relying on a visual optic of what we see as how it is. We're developing all other kinds of senses. Putting together ecological literacy and these psychological sensibilities really gives us an ethics and integrity, not only in our program, but develops that in our students, a sense of ethos as to how you move in the world, your way of being in the world with others, human and not human. So when we think about that we're really, urging an accountability, a responsibility from how the planet responds and how we respond to the planet. We're not the most numerous species, but we are the most impactful species. So in that sense, having an accountability and a responsibility with a shared planet matters. And that is really what we're doing when we're looking at changing detrimental narratives and their practices, owning up to that accountability and responsibility with a shared world. And how we do that in studying ecological psychology is an educative approach. It's not a clinical psychological approach in the sense of a clinical therapeutic. Certainly there's a therapia that's applied when you work ecopsychologically, because you're really working at a deep level with these interconnected problems in an effective way. So we're understanding that humans too are ecological life forms, and the same ecological processes that affect complex narratives and behaviors of Earth affect the complexity of human narratives and behaviors. So that makes all the difference in the world in how we design our communities, our businesses, our organizations, our institutions, how we think about the renewable energies that we use, the materials that we select, the products that we develop and distribute, that are they harmful or not, the services that we extend to others. So we're really looking at the interrelatedness of planetary processes and human psychology in that sense, human relationality. So the study of ecopsychology or ecological psychology, the way that we've been pioneering that here at Viridis, explores overarching planetary processes of energy exchange, looking at how that works ecologically, but also how does that work psychologically? How do we exchange energy through our narratives? And what is the impact or effect of that energy, like anger or hatred or frustration or disappointment? What does that actually mean? And what does it tell us about how we're behaving in that particular situation? Looking at diversity. Diversity doesn't just emerge in the ecological world any more than it just emerges in our psychology. It's cultivated through numerous interactions, symbiotic and symbiotic processes. And learning how to work with those then expands our psychological diversity that helps us then work with and be able to deal with stressors and disturbances in our lives. Decay and renewal is our third process, that there's no waste in the ecological world, but there's a lot of waste in human behavior and practices. How do we compost that? Ecology is always composting itself and bringing those nutrients back in to rejuvenate and regenerate that ecological system. We too can learn to compost psychologically, old patterns and old narratives that no longer serve interrelated, communal, shared way of being with the world. So that becomes important for us to think about as well. And relationship. That's interesting. And thinking about, we've been very proud that we've been a social species, but we're pushing that envelope to becoming more relational, meaning collaborative, cooperative, working together to solve these issues. We can't do these kinds of things alone, singularly, or with singular thinking, right? When we think about our businesses, our institutions, and our organizations, there's group thinking there, which can be very innovative or it can be very disastrous. And same thing in a community. We're, looking at that community culture, that corporate culture for its ecological processing, because those are all ecologies. A business is an ecology, an institution is an enormous ecology with ecosystems within ecosystems within ecosystems. And we too are a nested system. You think about our cells that make our tissues, that make our organs, that make this body plan. We're a nested ecology in that sense. So we operate with these same ecological overarching planetary processes psychologically. So we are of nature. And an ecological psychology program that we offer here at Viridis through ecological psychology is really understanding sort of this nature human participation, that we're a nature human. It's not human and then nature. It's not culture and then nature. It's a nature human, a nature culture. And we participate in these planetary processes directly and indirectly. To know that helps us make different ethical alignments in the decisions, in the policies, in the rules, the laws, the regulations that we make. And that is what makes a difference in our communities and in our world. Ecological psychology really is a career-changing education. It's transformative personally. It's transformative in how our graduates take their education and their degree into their either existing professions, or many have chosen to start their own enterprise. But it makes a difference in the world when we think about the interconnectivity of the internet. We're technological too. We've always been technological from the first time we picked up a stick or a rock. Techne, that the etymology of that word. So studying ecological psychology then really allows you to move differently in the world, think differently, behave differently, and educate others in ways to do that. And there's lots of ways to educate. You don't have to be a teacher or a professor. We're all educators in one way or another. And that's what we offer through our master's and our doctoral programs here at Viridis Graduate Institute. You can find us at viridis.edu or send us questions at viridis@viridis.edu. Thanks a lot.